We got to the. Uh, Thank you, Gurleen, for making time. Good morning to you back in US. Uh,
Good evening to you.
so thank you for coming on the podcast. Because for people who don't know Gurleen is a friend more than a client, and so we've known each other, and our daughters have known each other for quite some time. So uh, why don't you introduce yourself? What did you do? How did you come to food science and consumer science, and now consumer marketing insights?
Sure. Hi, I'm Gurleen Kaur Bhatia, and right now I'm based in the US, works with Mondelēz on in consumer science, consumer insights function, looking after Oreo brand core as well as innovation. Uh, my background, where do I start? Really, it's been a long journey in the professional world, to be honest, and my background from an education standpoint is in food science. I studied food science for my bachelor's degree, for my master's degree in Delhi and also in Hisar. And then since then, 16 years plus, I have been in the CPG, food industry, personal care, home care industries across different regions within India, and then moved out of India, worked in the UK, are now working in the US. Always been very, very passionate about food. And at 23, when I realized that I can study food and then I can make a career out of it, that was really amazing. And I studied food science for 5 years, and since then been in the CPG, FMCG companies, working across different functions, product development, consumer science, quality, and now in consumer insights.
So, where did the first interaction with sensory come in or consumer science come in? Because I've talked to a lot of food science students, and I'm talking currently, and most of
Mhm.
them have not too much clue about what sensory is or how does it get
Yeah,
done, who does it kind. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Uh, if I really go back and think about it, I feel like the exposure to food and exposure to dissecting the food in the literal sense is the sensory of it. That started very, very early on in my life, in my home environment itself. We are a household where a lot of my family is in food business. We have restaurants, we have bakeries back in India, and food was always a topic of discussion. What are we going to make next? How is this food? How does it taste like? It's high on spice, it's low on spice. And how does the sourness of this particular pickle is different from a South Indian pickle? How a sourness of a mango is different from tamarind? Now, in retrospect, I'm thinking that probably the seed really started from there, but I feel that's really true. From the very beginning, food has been an integral part and a very joyful discussion that used to happen at home all the time, and talking about where can you find a particular mithai that tastes so different from this from a other restaurant or other sweet shop. So that has been my very starting, you can say, interaction with food and sensory. And then more professionally, it started when I was learning food science in my bachelor's, in my master's as well. There used to be subjects about sensory science where they would uh, expose us to different methodologies, how it is done, sensory panels, and so on. But again, I would say more topical, more experiential knowledge came when I started working at the very first company that I worked with, which was ITC. I was working on a brand called Candyman in the confectionery category at that point in time, and that's where I kind of got exposed. I used to eat so much of candies at that time. And of course, you can't just eat it and keep on doing sensory. So we would eat, write all the attributes around aroma and taste and flavor, and then spit it out. So it was like my daily job. Every day I'm eating candies and then throwing it, eating candies and spitting it out. So that was fun interaction, but that was professionally the first one. And then it continued since then, to be honest.
So
Yeah.
you are now doing a consumer marketing insight question. So first of my controversial questions. between consumer science and consumer marketing insights? What do you like more?
Oh, that's a tough one. That's a tough one. I think it has been a sort of an evolution for me. When I started my career, I didn't start as a consumer scientist. So I started as a product developer. And that's how sort of got introduced into sensory. That's an important part of knowing what kind of a product to make, what consumers are going to like, dissect the product, and so on. So from there on, making the products, understanding the sensory, going a little deeper into sensory, doing it myself, and now into consumer insights, I feel like the touch points has kind of expanded for me from a business standpoint. In consumer insights, I feel more closer to business. I feel I can influence decisions a little more. The bandwidth of understanding the product or the proposition that is going out in the market is little more in consumer, being in the consumer insights function. So yeah, I'm enjoying that part of it. It does not mean I don't like consumer science or sensory, but for sure I'm enjoying the insights part of it because of the business element that it brings in. But at the core of it, I would say both are similar, but yet different. Similar in the sense that the skills are very transferable. One needs to listen to the consumers and look beyond the data. Not only what the overall liking is, but why that overall liking is, and able to join different data points and see the larger picture. So at the core of it, it is similar, transferable skills, but then there are a lot of differences as well.
You didn't give the preference.
I don't have. I can say I enjoyed when I was in consumer science a lot. It was my training ground when I was working with PepsiCo or with Reckitt. And now with Insights, I'm thoroughly enjoying it, and the ability to inform decisions, inform business, and that part I'm really looking forward to and enjoying right now.
But two questions, so one after, and but first one, doesn't consumer marketing insight worry more about the brand rather than the product? Means to put it very crudely, they a lot of them
Yeah.
don't really give a damn about the product.
I don't think so. Nobody gives a damn about the product in the insights team. But I think it's the function of how the teams are organized in the major companies.
Sure.
Usually it's the consumer science, which is organized within R&D function, and they therefore work more so on the product and the pack and with the R&D folks. And the insights teams are organized within the marketing function. And of course, they are custodians or are responsible for building brands and bringing brand insights, because that is how they are organized, and their stakeholders are mostly marketing. I do think though there are some companies where the lines are more blurred, and there are just single insights team who's looking after the product, the pack, the brand, the whole bundle and the whole proposition. But again, if I look at major MNCs and bigger companies, there is a distinction between the two. And yeah, I would say so. But people do give a damn about the product.
No, I know they give a damn about the product, but just that
sure.
They are also the custodians of A&M spend, and A&M spend tends to be major in every company. So if you're spending so many $1 million on advertising and marketing, then somebody
Absolutely.
needs to evaluate which dollar is getting wasted and which dollar is not getting wasted.
Absolutely.
So, but I'm actually taking a question much from, I would have asked that later, but since it's connected. And we were talking to Supriya from Unilever last week or so, and we've asked this actually question to everybody except maybe Nirmala. Do consumer science teams have a seat on the board? It means when I said board means I don't mean the board of the company, but when a decision is being made about a particular product and particular thing, how much do they contribute? How much? And again, if you can take it through India, lens of India, UK, US.
Yeah. I think for this one, whether they have a seat at the table, it's important to also think about the context in which we are saying seat at the table. Uh, if I talk about R&D context, within R&D, do consumer scientists sit at the table? Most definitely, yes. And again, I have seen evolution. When I started out in 2006, Sensory was not even a team in ITC. I was in the quality team doing the Sensory. And then when I moved to PepsiCo in a product development team, I was doing Sensory. So over a period of time, one has seen the change, and I'm sure it's been still evolving. So things have evolved, but within the R&D setup, we do have a sensory scientist, do have a seat at the table. The product developer and the sensory scientist, they have to work in tandem to be able to bring about products that consumers want and give a very laser sharp direction to the product developers. I mean, one example always keep coming to my mind, that when I used to talk to in the chocolate category in India, when a product developer is making different renditions and doing a design of experiment and making products. Uh, for example, they are changing the sugar content. I'm increasing 10% sugar, decreasing 10% sugar, increasing 5, decreasing 5. But increase in 10% sugar does not mean 10% increase in sweetness. And that's what the sensory scientist provides them the knowledge with, that how much you are able to change the product, in which direction. And food is a complex matrix. I mean, just by changing the sugar, you are not going to change the sweetness. It's not a linear correlation. You are changing the sweetness, but there are other ingredients at play. So how does that impact the other elements of the bitterness, of the aftertaste, and if there are other ingredients in the product, inclusions in the product, how that's going to change? So yes, definitely, with the R&D folks, they have a seat at the table very much. But when it comes to the broader context in a cross-functional teams, I think that's where there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. Maybe more so in India and a little bit less in the UK and the US. Again, because these companies are much more developed. In the West right now, in India, food industry is still coming up and expansion is still happening. Uh, the other thing I also feel like, I won't say it is lacking, but that's an area of opportunity for R&D folks. And I am at heart a R&D person, so I'm speaking it for myself as well.
Yeah.
That all of us needs to be a good storyteller to have a seat at the table, because I need to be all technical about the sensory work that I am doing, and I have to talk in lexicons and I have to talk in different attributes and say aftertaste and melt in mouth and things like that. But when I am delivering that result, when I'm delivering consumer feedback, it has to be in a language that a cross-functional team can understand. Somebody who's coming from marketing, somebody who's coming from supply chain, and so on and so forth, they should be able to understand what it really means and how it's impacting the business. How is it going for me to sell a more product? For example, if I go and say that by adding so and so ingredient, the softness of a chocolate is going to increase, or softness of chocolate is going to decrease. So what? What do I do with that? I have to tell them that it's going to improve, let's say, purchase intent of that product, or it's going to increase sales in the market, how it's going to increase the sales in the market. You can activate it in a certain way. You can do a shopper marketing in a certain way. So I have to talk in that language that people understand to be able to have a very solid ground in the stake. Otherwise, it's like, oh, we don't understand what they're saying. Yeah, sure. It's important and I know and everything, but I don't really understand what they are saying. So I think there is work to be done. The context really is important.
It actually leads to my next question. What do you think are the common myths about sensory, or what is the level of understanding that you find about sensory, again, with a lens of US, UK, and India? Or any other country that you work?
Yeah. I think one of the myths that's also probably prevalent, not only in the industry per se, but like commonly, sensory, is that really a science? Is that really your function? I mean, tasting food, is it a science thing? Do you really need to get trained about it? I mean, people just either they think it's not a discipline in itself, or people think that I don't think so. Training is required. You just have to taste it and then just say it is sweet, it's salty, it's savory, spicy, and that's all. So I think those probably will be very typical myths across. I think across all regions that I have worked and seen, that people don't seem to get. They really don't know if there is a discipline like that, and sometimes even within the companies also, as I was talking about, it's evolving. So it's been on that journey. Again, companies which are or categories which are more evolved, uh, they do have sensory scientists and they understand sensory a little bit more. Example like tea or coffee or wine. These categories, just by the virtue of it, how they have been in the market and how they have been uh, organized in these companies, they value sensory a little bit more. And probably the other thing is people think sensory probably is only for food or beverage. I mean, things that you can eat and not really home care, personal care. Whereas when I worked with Reckitt, even I got a eye-opening sort of a moment there where I feel like, oh my God, sensory is so important even in these categories where you're not putting stuff in your mouth, but the sensory, how it feels on the hand and how you're getting the whiff of a clean surface is so much important. And that's how consumers are going to know if it's clean or not clean. So sensory, that's where I feel like these probably are some of the myths, that it's not a discipline. If it's a discipline, you don't need training. It's only related to food, beverages, something that you're putting in your mouth. And I think it's not a myth, but the other misconception I feel like even in the organizations and the functions is sometimes we get confused between the sensory analysis or what the panelists are talking about to the consumer voice. So one needs to really differentiate between the two, that a sensory panelist is dissecting the product for you and telling you what are the different nuances across the sensory attributes of smell, taste, texture, aftertaste. But that does not mean that consumer wants that. I mean, a sensory scientist can tell you the chocolate is dark and it has so many cocoa notes in it and the bitterness is this way and that way, but that does not mean consumer need a dark chocolate and they're liking it. So one needs to see these two data points as they are and what's the role they're supposed to do, and then utilize to make informed decisions.
True. Also, that when we're talking, especially wine and whiskey and even tea and coffee, a lot of people confuse sensory with master blenders. How different are master blenders from what a sensory panel does?
I wouldn't know that.
Because we were talking to obviously client, or let me not name the client, who spoke. There was a fairly senior person who was so adamant that all 12 panelists that we had to be at the level of a master blender. And we said, you can't really have 12 master blenders in India for whiskey who will need know each and every note. Master blender is supposed to know each note and they can taste something and tell you all the nuances and all. But consumer scientists are not master blenders unless you've been working on the category for 20 years. And
in fact, I would say the other myth around sensory, now that I feel like it's kind of related, is that people think who are doing sensory or are part of the sensory panel, they are human instruments. I don't think so. They are human instruments. And again, I might be very controversial when I say this, but I don't think so. They are human instruments. There is always subjectivity and bias involved, even with the sensory panelist. Ambition definitely is to get the bias out of the testing that they're doing through training and through infrastructure, but it takes time. And as humans are, it can anytime creep in when you are doing something and something else is happening at the back of the mind. And it is more of a human behavior. So I think that's another sort of a myth, and we need to deal with
Sure.
is understanding that sensory panel is not human instrument. I mean, they're still humans, and they are helping you analyze things and measure things for you as accurately as possible, but they are not instruments.
Yes, true. In fact, we've been having discussions with a client who says the panel leader will just coordinate, get the panelists, train them once, and then get them to do the category. And we were saying, no, our panel leader has to play a much more active role to
Yeah.
make sure that the humans are
Yeah.
calibrating the right way. And they said, no,
Yeah.
but we've been doing it for 5 years and we don't feel that there's a need for having a panel leader of that level. Because if you want a panel leader who will talk to people, all 12 panelists every week, every 2 weeks, keep a individual ratings across attributes, keep an eye on it, you're looking for a slightly different level of a panel leader.
Yeah. 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 No,
So,
true.
which makes it a bit difficult to recruit and I think so.
And
That's
and sometimes I feel like even a very experienced panel leader with a very experienced panel, group of panel, you still hit a roadblock. You can't always able to develop a language in the time frame you have in mind, that 2 days I'll develop the language in a particular category about a particular product. It doesn't work always like that, I feel. And again, one example comes to my mind is when I was still in India doing a panel, and we really hit a roadblock where our panelists were not agreeing on a particular attribute of how to talk about the texture of the product. Somebody who's saying softness, the explanation that they are using for softness is different for everyone, and there were no consensus that's coming. And I feel like we just kind of made this very frugal method of making we used to call it a sensory box, where different material was introduced to be used as a reference point for texture, like there would be a silk cloth, a velvety cloth. um, what can we say about gritty? What is gritty and what is powdery? How these two are different? So there were a lot of different materials in that box, and we introduced that to the panels, and they got exposed. And then at least there was consensus that when we are talking about velvety, this kind of a velvety is what we mean. Everybody agrees, not agree, and then you can have more renditions of it. So even with the trained, both sides, trained panel and panelist, you hit a roadblock, and then you have to find an alternative way to still power through it and find a solution.
so. Does also that India has many more languages than US and UK who speak basically only one language to large extent.
Yeah,
I'm not
yeah,
saying that they don't speak
yeah,
Spanish
yeah,
in
yeah,
US, but
yeah, yeah.
so if I'm communicating with a panel in Bangalore who's speaking Kannada, who's speaking Malayali, who's speaking Hindi, and all parts of English, because none of our panelists are English speaking like you and I are, does it not make the job a far more complicated how to describe something?
I completely agree to that. I completely agree to that. Again, and the contexts are so different. The reference points are so different. I mean, we keep saying there that India is such a big country. There are many Indias in India. And it is true across different things, whether we talk about the food, the language, and then the language impacts the kind of work that we are talking about here, sensory, description, and panelist, and so on. It just makes the job even more difficult. And with how people are kind of becoming more and more cosmopolitan within India itself, that you will find in Bombay, you will find people from all different backgrounds, but they still speak the regional language. And similarly in Chennai, you will find people across India speaking different languages. And then you get a panel within Bombay where everybody is speaking their own language, and you have to agree on the sensory language that you are going to use and the references that they are going to use. It makes the job very, very difficult. It is a little easier when everybody's speaking the common language. UK being even a smaller country, I think the differences are far less as compared to the US, where again it's a bigger country and they bring their own reference points and things like that, and they're very proud of it. They always want to keep their region forward and talk about it. It's difficult in India.
So, coming to a slightly different topic, and though we have been discussing around it, why does a company need to invest in sensory? How does sensory help? What does sensory do, which makes it critical for a company to have consumer science or a consumer scientist and a sensory panel if they invest in?
Yeah, yeah. I think for me, as I was saying before, a sensory panelist and a product developer really needs to work in tandem. And they make the sensory panelist or the sensory function in itself make the job of the product developer much more easy, because they are able to provide that direction that a product developer needs. They are able to make their design of experiment faster, cheaper, more efficient, because you are giving a very laser sharp direction how you can change what you can change. But also sensory scientists, I feel like, play a very critical role in innovation. So understanding and bringing new innovation, which is very difficult to have a sustainable innovation in the market in an established category or even in a new category. How would you differentiate between two different types of cookies when you have like probably 1800 cookies in the market? And how do you get that market share that you are looking for? How do you make sure that consumers are still coming to you? Maybe they'll come to you for the first time, but how do you make sure that there is a repeat purchase happening unless and until you have a distinct proposition? And when I say distinct proposition, it has to be the whole bundle, the product sensory, the pack that's it's coming in, and the brand. So I think therefore the sensory scientists, the information that they bring, the way they inform the business, it's very imperative. It's critical to maintain the base business, to make sure that it's healthy. You are not dropping the ball anywhere. Maintain the quality of the product that you are known for, and at the same time bring new flavors, bring new innovation, bring new ways of new textures, new packaging for that matter. Even I know we started when I was in Mondelēz, we started doing some sort of a pack research as well with the sensory panelists. It was very, very niche and just very initial work, but I feel like even sensory panelists can do an amazing job if you go to the pack side of it, not just the product.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what you're saying, if I summarize, and is sensory can help you innovate better, so reduce product or brand launch failures, which saves the company money.
Yeah. I think definitely the work will be cheaper and faster.
Okay.
I don't think so. You can guarantee that there won't be any failures, or you can stop the failures from that sense. But there will be, if you fail, you will be failing faster.
Okay. So
and you'll be more
reduces
efficient.
risk.
Sorry?
It reduces the risk.
It reduces the risk. It makes it more efficient. One of the examples, actually, now that you're talking about it, I'm just thinking about Nutella biscuits and Nutella Be Ready. I'm not sure if they are in India, but they're launched in the US market, and it's been, I think, probably a year and a half or a little, maybe 1 year and 7-8 months. They launched, if I'm not wrong, in January of 2023, Be Ready and Nutella biscuits. They have their revenue during this year has been $110 million. with just that two products in a market like US, which has tons and tons of biscuits and cookies and sweet products. And Ferrero is not that big a company. I mean, if I compare from a brand perspective, Ferrero versus Mondelēz, Ferrero is fairly sort of not that much known as the Oreos of the world in the US. But with that innovation, with that differentiation that they have been able to bring in the market, and they are growing like crazy. And still, I think the awareness is very low, and it's not that a lot of people know about it, and still they have been able to manage that much of a revenue. So there is a long way for them for growth as well. And I'm not saying that they would have a sensory team who's brilliant or whatever. But my point is that if you bring a differentiation in the way the product is, it's definitely going to stick in market. And Nutella is kind of showing that path where bringing in new texture, bringing in new flavor, they have been able to achieve that. They did a test market, so they have also been very nimble in their approach. They did test market it very small before 23 for probably a year and a half, and they would have seen traction. And now they have just gone national, and it's been on a roll since then.
Any
And I'm
other
sure at some
any
point it
other
will come to India
stories?
as well. Sorry?
Any other stories? Any other examples?
I think this example for sure is a big one because it's been talk of Mondelēz talk all the time with us being there in the market, and Nutella biscuit is kind of making big waves. So expanding on Nutella, it's not just the product experience; it is also the pack experience that they have changed. I can send you like the pack pictures, or you can find it, of course, on Amazon. The biscuit pack is so different than how most of the cookies in the US is. It's very different. How it shows on the shelf, it's so different. The shelf impression is so much better. It looks premium. They have been charging premium on the product. And that's I think another thing that sensory or good innovation can give you. When you bring a differentiated product, you can charge premium on it because it's a different product. Consumers see that as an advantage. It's a benefit. It's not like any other cookie. It's not a glucose biscuit, or it's not a sandwich cookie that you're bringing in the market. It's something if not completely different, at least there is some different job that this product is doing. It is giving me a bit of a benefit on the sensorials, and I'm fine giving a little extra for the way it is looking on the shelf, the way it is tasting. I can eat it not only at home, I can take it with myself when I'm out and about, and therefore it's fine. So that's another advantage of sensory. I would say you can charge premium if done correctly.
Yeah, I mean, also that with it's a different point of view. I'm not disagreeing with you, but it's a slightly different twist. When you have, when you have Fog, which is Indian company, you have an owner, or you have a small nimble company like Ferrero, they're willing to take risks, and they're also willing to think through a thing. While in big setups like Unilever, Mondelēz, Procter, you have to have sensory scientists because they're going to get you the product to be right. If you don't get
Yeah.
your product or differentiation right, so Ferrero sees an opportunity, does this. Fox, one individual sees an opportunity in the DO market in India and changes the whole DO market of India. But that's because he has a gut feel, which is gut feel is nothing but where he went and talked to a lot of people, talked to consumers, talked to shopkeepers. Why, when you become bigger setups, you're almost a chief product officer when you're a consumer scientist.
Yeah. And also I think the other disadvantage, again, there are pros and cons to both. Bigger companies will have their own pros, but they have their own challenges. And similarly, a smaller company would have that as well. Sorry, what was the question? I forgot my chain of thought.
Yeah. So the bigger companies have the consumer scientists because they are the chief product officer. They are the ones who are saying, this is my product, this is how it is.
Yeah. So what's the question there is what I'm trying to
Just,
get
I
at.
mean,
Yeah.
The innovation will be dealt differently in a bigger company than a smaller company.
And it takes time to get to the market with the bigger companies because there are so many gatekeepers as well. So besides just having like a larger company, so more functions and everybody's doing their work in a subsequent way, that insights would give you insights, and then sensory scientist and product developer come, and then packaging development comes, and then marketing comes. So everything is happening in subsequent fashion, but there are so many gatekeepers as well, where it just takes time to get to the market, and that's the fun probably of a smaller company where they can get to the market much faster.
True.
But also we have the benefit of scale. We can learn globally what's happening, maybe in Mondelēz China, Mondelēz India, US can take it, and vice versa. So again, pros and cons across bigger and smaller companies.
Okay. And when you there's also saying that you can learn from failures. Any failures that you've seen and any learnings that we can take when we launch a product and then realize, oh shit, what have we done? Plus, I will add to the question. There's been a lot of talk, courtesy my friends in a FMCG company, let's not name them, about test and learn. Test
Mhm.
and just put the product in and then learn from it. No product testing, nothing, no consumer scientists. We make a product and we put it in the market.
Yeah. It's a very interesting question because test and learn is gaining a lot of momentum across different companies and in Mondelēz as well. And my understanding is this test and learn uh, methodology is coming from as a learning from smaller companies, because they feel like that's what smaller companies are doing. They don't have lot to lose on a brand side, and they can come to market much faster. Probably that's where the seed is coming to be like those smaller companies, think like a bigger company, execute like a smaller company in that sense. So I think the seed is coming from there. Can you do test and learn across all brands, across all innovation? I don't think so. That's what I feel. Not all products and not all kind of innovations can do test and learn. If I were to launch a product under Oreo in the US, I don't think so I can do a test and learn. I have to do my due diligence. I have to make sure everything is in place. And I'm not only talking about product and pack here. Legal system is so strong and is so against big manufacturers that you cannot even put one foot wrong in that direction. Whereas with the smaller brands, because the brand are small, the reach is small, the awareness is less. Even if anything goes wrong on the brand, you can get away with it. Not a lot of people get to know about it. But if anything happens to a bigger brand in a market where they are leaders, you cannot afford to kind of do anything to that. Again, example, Cadbury's, when Cadbury's got acquired by Kraft, in the UK, there was a big backlash. People just thought that this British company has become American now and they have changed the product, they have changed everything about it. Cadbury Dairy Milk doesn't stand for the same values anymore. Whereas, obviously, with the merger, with the takeover, whatever, with the acquisition, nothing had changed overnight. The product didn't change, the brand purpose didn't change, nothing had changed. If it had to change, it would take time. So it was not like immediately today, now Cadbury's is not a British company, it's an American company. Everything has changed, but there was such a backlash. So it's the perception of the people that plays such an important role when you are a very, very big important brand in the market. So coming back to test and learn, big brands, big markets, probably difficult without doing a due diligence, but there is definitely place for something niche, something smaller, something which we can do in a more controlled way. So if I had to launch a particular flavor for a particular market within US for a demographic, I can do that even under Oreo probably, because it will stay only in a particular state, only in so many retailers. I can do that, but I can not touch mainstream Oreo with a test and learn. That's what I think. But yeah, I think it's interesting to see. And I'm not sure if you're doing a test and learn that means not doing sensory at all. I don't think so. Uh, it might not be as in depth. It might not be. Um, it might be a little frugal. It might be lesser researches as compared to a national launch, but absolutely shooting in the dark, I don't think so. That's also test and learn.
It would be, if you do a test and learn, it could be based on the past sensory data. So you would not really go to a sensory panel and wait for the QDA results for 3 months to come back to you and then start your development process. You have the past sensory data. On that basis, you say, this is how the products are, this is how my products are, and you take a call. But whether that's an efficient system or not, because
yeah, I think sometimes empirical knowledge does help. I don't think so. That's also a data point. You can always use your past learnings, but every matrix is different. Every innovation is different. I'm not a big fan of shooting in the dark. Personally, I would say if I were to make a decision, I would say do what's required to be done to make sure it doesn't the whole effort does not go to waste. But yes, there has to be a time and a place for a test and learn, and then there is a time and a place for a more full-fledged innovation which needs its own rigor.
It's also that when I used to work in advertising, my boss had a saying when we used to go to client, every time a new concept. So the CEOs, the CMOs also have to have a new concept, because especially with test and learn, if you have to launch a brand, even in a country like India, we're not as developed as US are, but you need to take regulatory approvals, you need to get your pack approved, you need to get a pack graphic approved, you need to manufacture the product. So when we are talking about launching something in the market, there is a lot of work, and the supply chain management costs are not being calculated because you're manufacturing only for, say, Tamil Nadu. So, and you can't do launch in Hindi states in India, because that would mean that something which is meant for Delhi goes to Bihar, also goes to MP, UP. So there's a limitations people like to use, because the other thing we hear in India is that there are many Indias and you should manufacture for different Indias. But what happens to the cost of production? Where you make 5 different blends, they are 5, obviously they're slightly different, but you have to have 5 different times that these products are made, which would increase your cost.
I think the thing that surprised me the most was that US also has supply chain challenges. Coming from India, I thought US would have better supply chain facilities across. I mean, infra-wise and distribution and everything would be in a much better shape as compared to India. That's, again, my limited knowledge, preconceived notions. That's what I thought. But the supply chain challenges, I think, are across India, UK, and US equally very, very ingrained into probably, again, FMCG, CPG companies. Here the challenge is because the volumes are so high. The volumes are so high as compared to India. Already all the manufacturers are fully running full capacity. So bringing in new innovation means freeing up that capacity. And when you know that this product definitely is going to sell, and then you're bringing in innovation and you don't know if it's going to stick in the market or not, who wants to take that challenge? And bringing in new manufacturers, bringing in new lines, everything is expensive. So supply chain is a big challenge in the US as well.
Yeah, it's all these concepts test and learn, and there are different Indias. There are obviously, if you take from a taste perspective, what Florida is and what New York is and what San Francisco is are three different cities from a palette. But you cannot make Oreo differently for all three markets, because it would be crazy to make Oreo for one different market, because then you can't send it to the another market. So it's all these concepts come and thing. So my last two questions for you are very simple question. Why should people, especially I'm talking in a corporate level, marketing, product, operations, take time to spend time to understand sensory and what sensory brings to the table?
I think everything that we have been talking about sums up that. Sensory, from a product lens, sensory is definitely the core of it. And I am not saying the brand is not an important part of it. Of course, brand builds on the product, and brand builds on consumers' perception and so on. But you can make the brand as big as you want, and you can create all that conceptual things around what this product is going to do to you. But if the product is not going to perform, if the product is not going to do the job it's supposed to do, if it's a cookie and it's not a tasty cookie, if it's a chocolate and if it's not a delicious chocolate, I don't think so you can sell it only on the brand. I mean, again, could be controversial, but we know what's happening to Apple iPhone. When they came up in the market, their brand perception and their product, they were in tandem to each other. Brand was promising something, product was delivering it, and everything went well. But since then, we have seen that from a product lens, they are bringing in new variations, but the variations are so subtle. It's not really living up to the promise of the brand, if I can say it so. So you are seeing a little bit of a dip in how the product is performing and how the sales have been going. So you can talk all about the brand and still an aspirational brand. I'm not saying they are not. They're still quite an aspirational brand in a lot of companies, but the product probably is not delivering to that aspiration anymore at the same level, and you see the decline. So therefore, and if you're talking about a food product, a beverage product, even a home care, they have to do the job, and how they are going to do the job and how differentiated they are going to perform for the consumer, that knowledge, that decision making comes when a product developer and a sensory scientist works in tandem. So therefore, companies must invest in sensory and try to understand what it means for the consumer. More importantly,
My last question for you. Any message, any guidance to people who are studying food science and might consider or might sensory as a career?
I'm feeling very old now. You're asking me any advice or if I have to say something. I think I personally found food science to be not like a subject at all. It felt very as if I'm home, because it was such a relatable topic for me. It was tangible topic for me, if I can say that. I'm eating food, I'm consuming food, I'm buying packaged product, I'm buying all these consumable goods. So it was so tangible for me that it never felt like that I'm studying. So my passion for it really helped me understand it in a more detail, have fun with it. And then when I joined in a more professional world, there were so many different functions which while studying I didn't know. Obviously, I was enjoying what I was studying, but I didn't know how a business is run, how a food company is run, and there are so many different functions, and everybody has a role and a role to play in the success of it. And I never sort of worried about the ambiguity that every function is going to bring, and that's the reason I kept on changing different functions. And I can say, hopefully, I was good at some things, maybe better at other things or whatever. But keep that. What I want to say, the bottom line is what I want to say, that be interested in the work that you are doing or what you are studying. If you don't like food science, then don't study it. I'm assuming people who are doing food science, they like it. So keep your passion alive in it, remain interested in the subject, and also across any of the functions you do. The most important thing is understanding human behavior, whether it is inside the company or outside the company. When it goes outside the company, it's consumers, but when they are inside the companies, it's stakeholders. So remain interested in understanding the human behavior. Actually, another anecdote that my mother, now that I started working in consumer science, she keeps reminding me, do you remember when you were a child, your favorite thing to do? And she was talking about when I was like 3 or 4 years old. She told me that I used to go around the neighborhood, sit with the aunties, and talk to them about their daily routines. And I'm like, no, you are joking. That can't be true. And I'm like, I do the same job now. I go to the neighborhood, I talk to the consumer, know about their daily lives and what problems they are, what problems they face in the littlest of the things, and they're trying to find a solution for it. So it's like a full circle.
Except only thing is that to anecdote, you're not going to Punjabi aunties now.
Maybe, you never know. There is a big Indian population, Punjabi population in New Jersey. So maybe I'm going to Punjabi aunties as well.
Great. Thank you so much, Gurleen. Any questions, any comments, anything that you will want to say?
No, I think thank you so much for talking to me. It was really very nice. And sometimes you don't think about these things in your daily work. It's been a while that I have spoken to anybody about sensory, to be honest. So this was quite challenging for me, if I can say so.
I hope I
But
didn't make
at the
it that
same time,
difficult.
very enjoyable, very enjoyable. Stimulated my mind.
Sure. Thank you so much. Have a great
Thanks.
day. Thank you.
All right.
And to our viewers, thank you so much for being part of our podcast. Please don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. And if you like to know more about Sensory, please comment below. Till then, stay tuned for more episode of Sensory Moments.